So in your final project, there's a couple things that I'm going to be looking for. So what you should be turning in is you should be turning in your resource image. You should be turning in the small thumbnail one with properly drawn guidelines or orthogonal lines. And you want to make sure that you've used that to help you set up the composition similarly when you're drawing. So I will be looking for that small thumbnail with all of your orthogonals drawn out to your vanishing points and the basic form drawn over top either on acetate, tracing paper, or right on the image. Your finished drawing should have similar composition to your resource image. So when I look at your resource image, I should be able to see that the structure and the other comparable masses like bushes, trees, whatever the setting is, should be similarly composed. This just shows me that you use the guidelines appropriately, that you were reflecting on how far apart the corners of the structure should be and how far they should be from the vanishing points as well. Then I'm going to be looking for proper perspective and proportion. So proportion is kind of what I just talked about. We're looking for the height of the house to make sense for the width of the house. When I look at the resource image, we're looking for like the size of the windows and the size of the doors to be comparable to what we see in the image proportion-wise. I am also looking for proper perspective. And so perspective is that you use your vanishing points. And so anything that is on the left side of your building that is parallel to the base or where the roof meets the house, or those two guidelines that you use to set up your basic form, should match up with the left vanishing point. So in my drawing, you'll see the base of the building, okay, or house, the base of the flower boxes, top of the flower boxes, all of the panes in the windows all line up with that vanishing point, and then all of the lines to do the shingles on the roof, including the window lines up here that are on left facing panes of the house, line up with the left vanishing point. Okay. So when you're drawing those things, some things that I like to point out are like when you're drawing like window panes and stuff like that, and windows that are parallel to each other on the building, you can draw the line for both of these windows like at the same time. Like I can draw this pane and then this pane and then this pane for both of these windows at the same time. So that's something to think about when you're working on your sketch if you haven't thought about that already. Okay, then of course the opposite side or the right side of the building should all go back to the right vanishing point. So again, I want to check for those things. The base of the basic form that you set up should match up, the top of the basic form should match up, and then all of the horizontal lines that go back into space towards that vanishing point should match up with that vanishing point. Okay, so you can kind of see I'm using my ruler to kind of stop on those things. And then there's sometimes some things that kind of sneak in on the opposite sides that go to those vanishing points, to the opposite vanishing point. So for instance, these flower boxes, that kind of right side of the flower box is facing the same pane of space as the right side of the building. And so if you look, I did match up that little itty bitty part of those flower boxes with the vanishing point on the right. So just something to keep in mind. This little part of the roof here matches up with the left vanishing point. And you can see that I used the left vanishing point to draw that in. And that's because it is facing the same pane of space as the left side of the building. Okay. So you want to make sure that everything is going into proper perspective and proportion. If you have siding on your house, you want to make sure that the side of the house that you're drawing the siding on, that all of the siding, if it's horizontal, goes back to those vanishing points, because those are little things that you can do really easily by using vanishing points, and they will be things that it will be checking for your second objective. Third objective, value, texture, and details added. So here's where I like to talk about line weight, and so it's really important that you clean up your lines. I actually went back in with a 6H to kind of tidy up lines and make sure that they were really nice and neat. I also went in with a clicky eraser or a precision eraser to pull out some of the white highlights. And then the most important lines, or where I saw shadows underneath something, I made the line thicker and kind of more important looking. And so I kind of added value sometimes, or like cast shadows with line as well. Then shading doesn't have to be like fully like rendered to like perfection, but I want to see some rough shading just to show like this side of my house is like slightly darker than this side. And we know that that's how things work, how value renders form when it's a form that's a cube. And so one side is going to be lighter, another side is going to be darker. Those two values are always going to contrast with each other. I roughed in the background and kind of the surrounding like comparable masses, the bushes and the trees and things, more in a more gesture style to contrast with the architecture. So something else that you want to make sure that you add those details in, that you're using texture to render things, that your value matches the object, and then that you're really cleaning up your lines, really making really nice line quality. Level of difficulty is another thing that I'll be looking at. Did you pick just a simple building, or did you pick something that's more challenging? Things that have additional forms and additional windows and details are considered more difficult than really simple buildings that don't have as much detail. Okay, so you want to think about that when you're choosing your image as well as when you're executing it. So the last thing I'll be looking at is craftsmanship and neatness. So when you're working so tiny like this, with all these little details, it's really, really important to go in with a good eraser, okay? The clicky erasers that we have in the classroom work really, really well to kind of pull out your light areas in the end, and then you just want to make sure that you kind of blow those little eraser bits away. Make sure that you go in and really clean up your lines, and then I would suggest, highly suggest, making sure that you spray this with workable fixative or final fixative when you are done with it. And those are the things that I'll be looking for. They were worth 5 points each. The total sketch is worth 25 points total.